Hi, I am Igor Smirnov, international grandmaster and chess coach. Here is the video lesson Breaking Stereotypes. Chess players share a lot of wrong chess stereotypes. In this video, we'll talk about these common ideas which are objectively not correct. It will probably be a series of videos because, well, there are a lot of these misconceived stereotypes. And here we will discuss the pin of a knight on f6 after bishop g5 and the prophylactic move h6. I'm in the situation like this. The f6 knight is pinned by the bishop g5. Of course, the same situation may happen for white. Then it will look like this. And of course the same thing may happen on the queen side as well. Here it is. Obviously the general ideas will be the same for each of these situations. Such a pin happens pretty often in practical games. Amateur players like to create such pin very much. And usually chess players treat this pin as something very powerful and try to prevent it by making a prophylactic move a3. It is often incorrect, and a little later I'll tell you why. Now let's analyze this pin more specifically. So, what is the idea behind the move bishop g5? Obviously, white doesn't want to take the knight f6. The bishop is stronger than a knight, and therefore it makes no sense to spend two moves just to make this bad exchange. That's why the only thing which white really can do here is to try to get benefit out of this pin. In this case, white needs to attack the f6 knight by one more piece, perhaps with his knight from the d5. Then white will take an f6, will double the black's pawns, and then will attack them somehow. Thus, this is the only real idea which white can realize in this position. Now let's go back. Since black is aware about the white's main threat, black can quite easily protect his position, and there are a lot of ways how black can do it. Black needs to take control over the square d5. Black can do it by making the move c6. Black usually has a pawn there, thus black can easily play c6. Also, black can play bishop c8 to the e6. It will also give black control over the d5 square. Another thing, black can move his dark squared bishop on the e7. This will obviously neutralize the pin. And the last thing, black can put the knight b8 to the d7. Thus black will protect the f6 knight and will be able to remove the queen from the d8 square. Here I used all the defensive possibilities. Well, of course, it's enough to use only one of them. Now let's go forward. If black protected his position and white can't get benefit out of this pin, then it means that this pin is useless for white and the bishop g5 does nothing. Moreover, this bishop on the g5 can be not a power but a weak point of the white's position. And now I'll show you a few concrete examples. Here is a classical game Winter Capablanca, where white did this pin after bishop g5. As we already know, it's a mistake. There is no way for white to get benefit out of this pin. The e4 and d5 squares are unavailable for the white's knight. Therefore, white can't attack the f6 knight by one more piece. Black played h6, and I want you to pay attention on this move, h6. Think about this. The bishop g5 controls two diagonals, h4 d8 and c1 h6. When you play h6 and bishop h4, now the bishop is controlling only one diagonal. h4 d8. Therefore, you reduce the power of this bishop in 2 times. So this is a very powerful idea. This idea looks obvious, however, most players have never thought about it. Okay, let's see what happened then. Black played c5, and after knight d5, Black responded g5. This totally decreases the activity of the white's dark squared bishop. It didn't do anything on the h4, but on the g3 it will be totally passive. And by the way, white can't use tactics. After knight g5, Black will first take the d5 knight, and then will win the knight for nothing. That's why white took on the f6 and played bishop g3. In this situation, the black's pawns e5 and g5 totally restrict an activity of the white's bishop g3, which is now totally paralyzed. Okay, now let's think what white can do in this position, how white can bring his bishop back into the game. Obviously, the only thing which white can do is to move the knight, let's say to the d2, then to play f3 and bishop f2. It's the only possible idea for white, but of course it means that something is wrong with the white's position. If white has to move the knight back, then to weaken his position by playing f3, and then to spend time on playing bishop f2, and after all, the bishop will appear on the diagonal g1 a7. At the same time, the bishop can be placed on this diagonal immediately from the initial position. White can play bishop c1 e3 and put the bishop on this diagonal. It just shows again that the move bishop g5 was a bad mistake for white here. Bishop g5, bishop g4. Here black can just totally prevent this plan, and this already gives black a strategically winning position. After h3, an exchange there, the white's bishop is trapped. It's in the cage, and white has no possibility to bring it back into the game. As I've already said, this gives black a strategically winning position. The black's plan here is very simple. Black should start an attack on the queen side, and his attack will be easily successful because black has an extra piece, an extra bishop into the game. Let's make a few more moves to see how it happened. Black played a5, that's right. And then after a couple of moves, rook b8 with an idea b5, and you see on the queen side black can use all his 3 pieces, while white can use only 2 rooks. That's why black played b5 and won the game easily. Here is another similar example. White played bishop g5, black responded h6. Again, I recommend you to play h6 always after an opponent's move bishop g5. Bishop h4, c takes, g5, and d6. After this forced inversion, black got the position we discussed in the previous example. The black's pawns e5 and g5 restrict an activity of the white's bishop, and it makes it pretty difficult for white to bring the bishop back into the game. After knight d2, black played bishop g4, and the situation with the white's kingside pieces becomes totally paralyzed. White can't move his knight, can't move his bishop, and it's difficult to activate his position somehow.